In the United States today, there are great disparities of wealth between the rich and the middle class and the poor. In fact, the rich, the wealthiest 1% of our country, pays a much lower rate of taxes than everyone else. According to Warren Buffett, who makes millions of dollars, his secretary pays a much lower rate of taxes on her income than he does. So he proposed a rule, the Buffett rule. I'd like to thank everyone for being here for today's round. For the motion, the United States federal government should significantly increase taxes. Now, this is a policy motion, and I have a few quick definitions before I get into the plan and the contentions of the affirmation team in today's round. Now, first off, taxes should be defined as a source of government revenue taken from people, corporations, etc. Basically, people know what taxes, a source of government revenue taken from people. And significantly increase is basically just to raise taxes, raise tax rates. So, now, moving on to the judging criterion of today's round. The judging criterion for the round should be net benefits, which is basically whichever side shows the most benefits to the American people and to the United States as a whole, and not just economic aspects, but in all aspects, including economic aspects, including whichever side most greatly supports American ideals and values, which is basically, in effect, the most beneficial to the United States and its causes. So the plan for today's round is basically the Buffett rule, and now I'll explain this right now. Now, the Buffett rule is basically a plan to increase the tax rate for everyone in the country making more than $1 million. And as proposed in Obama's State of the Union address, the minimum tax rate for people making over $1 million or more, making $1 million or more in the country, should be 30%. So that'd be the minimum tax rate. So now I'm going to quickly go on to the harms of the status quo and why this plan will fix them. So first off, our first contention is about increased revenue. Now, currently in the United States, we have a huge debt and a huge deficit also. We have a debt of well over $14 trillion and a deficit of just about $1 trillion. And currently the government is just borrowing more money, and we aren't making enough revenue. Well, the Buffett rule is actually one of the first steps we can make towards combating our huge deficit. The proposed projections for how much the Buffett rule would make would be about $50 billion. Sure, this isn't enough to basically get rid of our deficit, but it's a step towards this. And any new sources of revenue our government can make right now is a source it should be taking. And because the rich have a lot of money, they can spare this money if they have higher taxes, and they can help combat the huge deficit we have right now. Can you just please take this minus or pick your first POI?
Will this $50 billion that you calculated be on a yearly basis over a course of 10 years?
Oh yeah, sorry. It's calculated to increase the government revenue per year, basically. So yeah, it's projected to increase the government revenue $50 billion per year. Now, there are many problems with the debt in the United States today. For instance, as our debt increases, basically the United States continues to borrow money from other countries. There's going to come to a point where basically it may hurt our credit rating. Sure, it hasn't hurt our credit rating yet, but in the future, if the United States continues to borrow and our debt continues to increase, it will hurt the credit rating of the United States, will actually cause which will cause the United States to have to basically pay more interest to the people it borrows from, and only put the United States into more debt. More of our money will have to go to paying interest rates to the debt, and it will further plummet the United States into a higher deficit and a higher debt. In addition to this, the United States has many new issues it needs to deal with many new programs. Over many years, programs such as Medicare and Social Security have become more of a financial burden to the United States government. And as our debt and deficit continue to increase, you can see that we need more sources of revenue, because basically our interest rates will only continue to increase if our credit score goes down. And meanwhile, our deficit only continues to increase as programs such as Medicare and Social Security continue to eat up how much money the United States government has to pay. We need more sources of revenue, and this is a great step towards starting this. But now my second contention in today's debate is fairness. Now, the main harm of this is currently in the United States, the top 10% the wealthiest 10% in our country own the majority of the wealth. And actually, since the 1960s, you can see that there's been great disparities in how much, there's been great growth in these disparities of wealth. Since the 1960s, the top 1% has seen a 281% income climb. The top 1/5 of the wealth in the United States has seen a 95% increase in income, while a bottom 1/5 have only seen a 16% increase in income. You can see that the wealthiest people in the United States are having their income increase much more than the lower classes in America. And you can see that this is just showing that our country is evolving into basically a nation where the wealthiest people hold most of the wealth, but yet they're still paying the lowest tax rates. Is it fair if the wealthy, the people who control the most of the wealth in the United States, are paying the lowest rates of taxes, some of them lower than 14% of their taxable income? No, this is not fair when middle-class families pay close to 30%. It is not fair that the people who make millions of dollars, who basically live in luxury and have don't have to worry about financial needs on a daily basis, pay less taxes than the poor who struggle on a day-to-day basis just to make ends meet. So you can see that on the fairness aspect in today's round, we should tax the rich more, as they make a much greater amount of money than the middle classes and the poor in the United States society, yet they're paying much less than they're not paying their fair share of taxes. And our third tension in today's debate is about public opinion. Now, according to Pew Research polls, the majority of Americans believe that the current tax system is unfair. And the majority of Americans also believe that focusing on the economy and improving it is our #1 concern right now. And actually, across the nation, in the Occupy movement, which began on Wall Street, many Americans, and 99%, are calling for, are basically rallying against the 1%, the top 1% wealthy in our nation, calling for a more fair system, calling for them to pay their fair share. So you can see that that Americans have greatly voiced their opinion in protests across the country. You'll see that the majority of Americans favor a new current tax system, and this is impactful to the United States because it increases the faith in government if the government does what people want to do. And overall, this actually increases consumer confidence, because it's been shown that an increased faith in government increases consumer confidence, which makes up 71% of our economy. So you can see that doing what the people want is ultimately the best way to help our economy. So you can see that doing what they want actually fixes many economic problems in the United States. So we're going to ask for a strong vote in favor of the affirmation.
Is everyone ready? Ready? Alright, I'm going to show you some of the start time. Okay, so once again, thank you everyone for being here today. We're debating the motion the United States federal government should significantly increase taxes. So, quick roadmap. I'm going to be going over some quick observations before going on case and then off case points. But I'm going to be cross-applying different things, so it might get a bit hectic, but I'm going to try and keep it as clear as I can. So with that, I'm going to go into observations. And that is, what this debate is going to come down to is on two levels. And that is what in order for you to vote affirmation for you in today's debate, you need to be looking on whether affirmation wins not one, not either of them, but both at the same time. And that is, one, should we raise taxes? And our off case in today's debate explains to you entirely why we should never raise taxes in today's society. But on the second half, and what the affirmation have placed their burden on themselves is, if we were to have revenue from that taxes, what do we do with it? Do we decrease our debt? Do we spend more? I mean, all these things that they've come up with, they place a burden that if they do not uphold, should we actually decrease our debt as opposed to put that money elsewhere? They've also lost in today's debate. So we have a debate that has on two levels. So now I'm going to go in. Number one is their going over their plan specifically, their plan tax. And that is, the buffer rule is to increase the minimum tax rate of 30% on people making over $1 billion. And I want to say, Judge, the reason why this hasn't been implemented in today's society already is because this is so ambiguous. Now let me go over a quick what taxes are. We have taxes, especially, and this applies specifically to that top 1% in America, of salary tax, capital gains tax, dividends tax. And the reason why the top 1% pay less overall than the bottom, than the 99%, is because they make most of their money from capital gains, from investing in the stock market, from getting dividends, from getting profit as their company does better. Getting this money back is not taxed at the same rate as salary tax. Thus, the affirmation already lost in today's debate because they proposed to you a plan that has no real details, there's not a real plan here. Where's this money, where's this tax going to come from? Is it going to solve the disparity in tax rate, in which case let's take it from capital gains tax specifically. I'm not going to go over whether this is indeed right or not, but just look at the plan text specifically. Let's isolate this as a problem. Their plan doesn't make sense. Where do we get the money from? Where do we tax? At the moment, really, they have no plan. But I'm going to go over, because most of their contentions are pretty bland, over why you can actually achieve most of their how actually they harm themselves, and even you can achieve many of these benefits through different ways, as to show they've also lost in today's debate. So they came up with harm, saying, hey, we have they would make billions of dollars per year just purely from revenue from these taxes. And they plan to spend it, I think I got their first contention was spending this on decreasing the debt, decreasing our deficit. But let me point out that this is on that second level that I pointed out to you in today's debate, that with that revenue that we now have, do we decrease our deficit? Do we decrease our debt? Or do we spend it? Do we put it into job innovation? Do we put it into green energy? Do we lift the entire economy up and end up dealing with our debt just like we did in World War II? After World War II, we accumulated a large amount of debt. And through not decreasing that debt, but spending, getting new jobs, innovating in new technology, in computers, in transportation, and the freeway, we actually were able to get out of that debt just through spending. Throughout time, it just deteriorated because the economy was getting so much better. So on the very aspect of what do we do with that $50 billion, the affirmation of loss, because we should not spend it on decreasing the debt, but putting it into other, for innovating. Let's lift the entire economy up, as opposed to staying on the same level and decreasing the debt. On top of that, one of the harms they said is, hey, we could decrease our credit scores. But let me point out that recently, when the credit score has been decreased for the United States, it has not been because of how big our debt is. It has had nothing to do with that. It has had to do with the fact that we have had squabbles in Congress. It's the fact that we nearly defaulted on our loans. And that is why our credit rating went down, because investors thought, oh, maybe Congress, maybe politics won't get their act together. This has nothing to do with the size of our debt. Thus, this harm is absolutely crossed off the flow. So, as we can see, their harms are non-existent, and they are not solved for best by decreasing our debt. So that's the first point off the floor. That's the actual, the tangible benefits, or the tangible logistics of their plan. But their second and third contention are essentially the same. They're just, hey, it's fairness, and the impact comes out to fairness between do we treat the public opinion and how do we treat the middle class? Well, their net benefits, the judging criteria in today's debate is net benefits based on economic. They've already lost on economic, but also on American ideals, and they've lost on this also, because I beg to differ that the entire that the American ideal of the United States is based on fairness. No, we pride ourselves in a meritocracy. When we founded the United States, when we came over here as colonies, we created a nation based on capitalism, based on competition, based on who can make it to the top and bring the rest with them. Actually, Andrew Carnegie wrote a very historical piece listing exactly these reasons I just proposed to you. That when the rich get richer, it brings the rest up with them. We actually pride ourselves in having some of the richest people in the world because they've lifted the rest of society. We do not have a nation based on fairness. We have a nation based on meritocracy, and the rich have got there based on, whether it be them individually or their entire families, have got there because they've worked hardest and they've been most successful at what they do. And with that, we have a great infrastructure. We have a GDP with one of the best economies in the world because we have a nation based on meritocracy. Just fairness is not off the floor. And public opinion, basically, the entire impact of their public opinion point, which is their third contention, is, hey, increased faith in government means increasing consumer spending. So basically, the impact of this is better consumer spending. But I'm going to show you in our off case how actually you've got to weigh this against the harms of taxing. And the fact that consumer spending goes down because of taxing. And you have to weigh this against that. And they've shown you no specific increase in consumer spending. So you have to look at what our case is. Now I'm going to go off case. My partner will extend on it if I don't get time. But really quickly. Number one is it suppresses investment. We have from the top 1%, we have a trickle-down effect of cooperation. That is, when you raise taxes on the rich, you have outsourcing. You move jobs because they can make more money because there's a lower tax rate in Europe, in Asia, in places like that. We have examples of Tyco International, Cooper Industry, Global Sourcing. These are companies that have outsourced and moved countries in the last few years purely because of tax reasons. You also have less investment in new technology. When you are taking away money from people who have lots of it, they are less incentivized to put that money into green technology, invest it in the economy. That's not harm that way. The last 10 seconds, then I'm going to have to go. And that is, second is it stifles job growth. They no longer hire as many people. And my partner's going to extend on the fact that taxes actually decrease consumer confidence. But the point is, they hire less people when they have less money. Thus, this actually increases unemployment, something that is at a glacially increasing right now. It's a very delicate balance. Thus, I urge a vote in the negation because of all the harms that they presented in this with their plan. Thank you.
Hi, Alright, once again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here and making today's debate possible. So, brief roadmap. First, I'm going to address the opposition's case, and then I'm going to go into our own case. So, the first, the opposition brought up two things that they really, the burnout they put on the opposition team. Now, they said that we need to prove a need for this. We need to say that what will we do with it, and I'm here to show you that we are. And then I'm going to go into the case. So, first. I said there's no need for an extra $50 billion in revenue. And we see here that we clearly do need this money. We need any money that we can possibly get. We see here a deficit that's almost at $1 trillion in this year's just started. We need money to go back and lower our debt, lower our deficit, due to the fact that we owe $14 trillion, and the economy is as the public opinion believes that the economy is the most important factor in our society. We obviously need to lower this debt. We need consumer confidence back. And this $50 billion annual source of income will be able to lower this. We'll be able to give this confidence back to these individuals, which is what the need for is. Yes, I'll take your first of two POIs.
How do you address the fact that despite the fact that we have a big deficit each year and $14 trillion worth of debt, we have the biggest and most successful economy in the entire world?
How it is inevitable that we have why I just refute this with this quote by Mike Mullen. The greatest threat to our national security is our debt. So we see here that this debt is constantly overlooming on our society, and we need to address this. Yes, this may not knock our debt and knock our deficit completely out of the water, but we need to get a handle on this debt, this deficit, and we need to slowly lower it down. On to their second point was that what are we going to do with it? Like my partner said, we're going to put it back into our debt. And we see here $50 billion. What is this going to do? This is going to be benefiting people. Any source of income, especially from the rich, who people who've already sustained the highest ranking essentially in their society, do not need this extra money, which I'll be investing into their post. Yes, I'll take your second.
Okay, so in your plan text, you're taking this $50 billion a year and you're going to be investing it into paying off our deficit. So how is that relating back to the common person? How is that going to be solving for the benefits of consumer confidence, and how is it going to be addressing our
because consumer confidence? I get what you're saying. Consumer confidence is directly related to our debt and our deficit. So therefore, if we address this, then consumer confidence will follow in suit. On to their case. And mind you, they got into their entire case in the last minute of their speech. So obviously this really had, if this was such an important factor into their speech, they would have addressed it earlier on, and they only got to the last minute and still did not finish it. And the first, along with their second, are extremely related. One is that it essentially suppresses spending by the rich, and it also stifles job growth. However, these individuals, these 10%, are millionaires, they're billionaires, they're making a plethora of money, and really this is not going to stifle their spending. These individuals are wealthy and rich to start with, and they really are not going to be stifled to the extent that they believe they'll be taking over POIs at the time. They see that as suppressing spending. They're going to be going into offshore accounts, so they're going to be going over here. And we see this is completely ridiculous due to the fact that we have individuals right now living in our society and that are constantly living in our society and making do with these constant taxes added on the rich going on off that basis that these individuals are wealthy enough that they could handle this extra tax. Now going on off their case, going on to our own case, let's address the motion or the plan that the opposition or proposition is proposing to you, which is the Buffett rule proposed by Warren Buffett. And essentially this is a 30% minimum tax on all sources of income. And the opposition had some issues with capital gains, etc. We said all income. So this means any source of money that this individual is taking in is going to be taxed. So it doesn't matter if they're investing in real estate, economy, or they're just working and getting that money. All of this money is going to be taxed. I'll be taking no more POIs at this time. As we see here, all this money is going to be taxed. So that means as all combined together, $1 million or more, this is going to be under the Buffett rule, which is the 30% minimum tax. On to our first contention that they reviewed essentially with their two burden, which is that an increase of revenue. And we see here this is projected to have a $50 billion annual increase in revenue per year. And we see anything is better than nothing. Considering the fact that we are taxing the rich and not the poor or the middle class, we're taking something from the wealthy that they could obtain, they could handle, and they could overall stimulate our economy. Going on to our second contention, which they brought up with that, that they refute with saying that's a meritocracy, and that the rich are going to lift our society, and that the rich are going to bring others with them. If we see here, the rich are the 1%. We are the 99%. We are the average Joes. We are the common people. If this is the case, how come it's not the 1% and the 99%? This is a complete fallacy proposed by the opposition. And we see here that the 1% is isolated on their own and have nothing to do with the 99%. They claim that the 99% are going to be lifted on the back of the 1%. Obviously, this is not happening in today's day and age. And we see here that the Buffett will actually be providing this way for the 1% to essentially carry the 99%. So by voting in favor for the proposition team, you're essentially, I essentially turned the argument saying that the rich will lift society by the rich providing taxes, which will go into our debt, which will overall bring our economy up. On to our fairness, we said, it improves our society as a whole. And the society's, we have the rich like Warren Buffett, who's paying, he may be paying, who's paying less in taxes than his secretary. So we have the secretary who is who's not working as much, but has to pay more in taxes than Warren Buffett, who is who's making millions and millions of dollars. On to our third and final contention, which is of public opinion. And this in today's debate have the most weight in today's debate, because this is the public, this is the individuals of the United States of America. So we see here they brought up that public opinion really is. We see here that they basically figured out by it has no relevancy in today's debate due to several other reasons. But we see here public opinion we could essentially bring into the fact of democracy. And democracy is the fundamental and the key foundation of the United States. And we see here that this public opinion, in the Pew Research, that the majority of Americans feel that the current system is unfair. And we want democracy, and democracy is what the United States is founded upon, as well as capitalism and other aspects of this. But democracy is the concept, the overarching concept that people are living in today's society. If this is unfair, then democracy is obviously not existing. We want the people to have faith in our government, and in doing so, the democracy will prevail once again. We see the harms of this with our over $14 trillion debt. Our government currently favoring the rich, and we have the middle and the lower class being completely negated. And if this plan is instituted, we'll see a $50 billion increase in taxes and put into our debt. Because this is a strong vote in favor of the proposition team. Thank you.
If you guys have a phone.
Yeah,
Do you have two phones?
Yeah.
That's
Use it. Yeah, so make sure you tap it before it locks, but the password's 4746.
Thank you.
Is everyone ready? Okay, that'll begin. So as I start my time, I'd just like to extend my partner's blanket of thanks for everyone for making this debate possible. The motion that we're debating is, once again, the United States federal government should significantly increase taxes. And before I go over the proposition's plan and their benefits, and then onto the opposition's case, I'm first going to go over the observations that my partner made initially in his first speech. So the two observations were that he basically saw that the debate was going to come down to is, one, should we or should we not raise the taxes, and two, what should we do with the revenue if indeed we should raise the taxes. And these are the two things that the proposition is really going to need to adequately address in order to win today's debate. So currently in the proposition's case, they said, yes, we should raise the taxes, and that's kind of what their plan is addressing, and they said that, two, we should take all of the revenue from the taxes, which is going to be about $50 billion a year, and we should put it directly into the deficit. So with that, I'm just going to go into the proposition's plan specifically. Now, what the proposition first speaker started off with today is just talking about Warren Buffett and the Warren Buffett rule, and it's all about how the 1%, the people in the country with the highest incomes, they're not paying as much taxes as they should, and that's how they get into their fairness contentions later. But it's all about how they're paying less taxes than their secretaries are. But what the proposition doesn't bring up in today's debate is that Warren Buffett is 1% of the 1% that is actually paying lower taxes than their secretary. This is not just the 1% that we're talking about. The 1% this doesn't apply to. The only people that are going to be affected by the proposition's plan is the 1% of the 1%. So first of all, the motion calls for a significant increase in taxes. So if this is only affecting, such a tiny portion of our population, bless you, it's not going to be a significant increase. Additionally, they don't mention that Warren Buffett himself is actually accused of insurance fraud, owing trillions of dollars to the federal government because he hasn't paid his insurance. But that's just kind of fun facts. With that, I'll go into their actual plan, which is talking about how the minimum tax rate for the 1% is going to be 30%. And and we've already addressed that this is not going to be a significant increase. But not only is it not going to be a significant increase, but they don't even have a well-detailed plan. So on that, they've lost already. They don't say, they say, okay, well, it's going to be all the income is going to have to be taxed at 30%. But if they're suggesting a 30-30-30 plan, then it's going to be a taxation of 90% for the 1%, for the few people that this is going to actually affect, which is an atrocious rate. Additionally, they don't. I mean, the other the way that they could go is reforming the capital gains tax, but they don't say how they're going to do this. If it's going to be passed legislatively, if they're going to be actually changing the rules of this taxation, they don't address it. Their plan, they don't really have a plan. They have some magical, wonderful idea where somehow we're able to tax them all at 30% of whatever income they've got, but they don't say how we're going to figure out what they're getting through their capital gains. They're not going to actually addressing what they are earning and through what forms of taxation and how it's going to be addressed. So they've lost on their plan itself. Now, additionally, their benefits and their impacts of their benefits don't add up either. The first one is their first contention is all just talking about our credit rating, and that's really their impact. Is that if our credit rating goes down, then it's going to be hurting us because we're going to have our deficit's going to grow and it's going to be hurting our country overall. And how this is going to be a great step towards fixing our deficit. But my partner came up here and he said, well, first of all, the credit rating isn't even linked back to the deficit. The credit rating has to do with Congress, and that's why our credit rating went down last time. That's why there was a decline. And the proposition team did not address this. So they basically admitted that their first contention, this impact completely falls, and therefore it no longer stands in today's debate. All they brought up again when they were rebuilding this contention was that anything is better than nothing, but that doesn't address what my partner brought up. The fact is that they don't have any benefit to this contention, yes?
I'm sorry, but how does... our contention was saying we raised $50 billion in revenue, and we said that a debt is an example of something we could put that into, but where did we say that this must go to debt? Can't our plan address anything? Can't it address what your partner said by going into other programs?
No, it can't go. You can't just say, oh, well, we don't know what we're going to put it in. We're going to get this $50 billion of revenue, and this is all the different things that it can go into. Because in the proposition's entire case, they say, oh, we're going to help the credit rating by investing it into the deficit. Their second and third was like, oh, we're going to help all these things by putting it in the deficit. When they went through the opposition's case, they said, oh, it's going to go into the deficit. They've conceded to the fact that their plan is saying that they're going to take this $50 billion and they're going to be putting it into the deficit. That's what my partner just gave his speech. My partner just gave a speech under that same assumption. They didn't bring this up, so I mean they basically conceded to it. And the fact is that their first contention, their overall impact, was of the credit rating and the impacts that would subsequently result of the credit rating declining, or the credit rating increasing. But we've already shown how there was no actual adequate links, so their first contention falls. Their second and third were the same thing. They haven't argued that. It's just fairness. It's their impacts. It doesn't matter what their taglines are. The impact is fairness. And they say that first of all, it's more fair for the American people, and second of all, more faith in government is going to be more consumer spending or more consumer confidence. But they don't address the fact that again, consumer confidence is going to be. They don't show how this is going to be. They don't address how this is already going to be negated by increased taxation, which is going to mean outsourcing, more job loss, higher unemployment rate. They haven't addressed this at all. So their second and third contentions essentially fall. Additionally, what has more weight is the fact that our country was founded as a meritocracy, saying that if you worked harder and you earned more, you'd be able to maintain that standard of living, you'd be able to maintain that wealth, you'd be able to work for what you want to get out of your country. And it's not about fairness, and they haven't addressed that either. All they said is that we need consumer confidence, but they haven't addressed the fact that we've already attacked their links, and their links have fallen. Now, going on to the opposition case, after we've already gone over the observations, one, they haven't shown why we should raise taxes because they haven't adequately addressed our case, which I'll go into in a moment. And second of all, they've shown that it should go into the deficit, but they don't have any actual impacts of putting it into the deficit. Why that's good? We've shown why all of their impacts fall because there aren't any actual links between putting the money into the deficit and getting out of it what they want to. Even if those links did exist, it would still not be significant in today's debate. Now, the first contention of the opposition case was that it's going to be suppressing investment because there's going to be more outsourcing. Currently, in the last few years, because of taxation increases in the United States on corporations, and because of the high rate of taxation of corporations in the United States, Halliburton, Accenture, Foster Wheeler Limited, Ingersoll Rand Company, Tyco International, Cooper Industries, and so on. There's about 10 out of the top 50 corporations in our country. These have all outsourced because of taxation in the United States. So the fact is that outsourcing means Americans are losing their jobs. It means that Americans are going to have a higher unemployment rate, and all of the impacts of that when just by raising the taxation on these corporations. So that's going to be directly hurting the American people. done in refutation to this is restated their third contention, which already fell. Our second contention is it's going to stifle job growth because fewer people are going to be hiring. They haven't really refuted this either. And our third contention was with meritocracy. For all these reasons, I ask for the vote. Thank you.
Do you guys want your phone back?
Do you want to use it?
No, we just need it too, because I think I use when we're on I don't have a timer for speech. Okay, so ready? I'm just going to dive right in. Alright, so once again, thank you. I'm going to extend my opponents and partners blanket of thanks. Thank you everyone for being here today. The motion we're debating once again is the United States federal government should significantly increase taxes. So Judge, a quick roadmap what my speech, my final opposition speech is going to be about. I have two observations that we brought up continuously, which are essentially the 8 priority issues in today's debate, before going over 3 voters and then judging criteria. Quick taglines, number 1 will be plan text, number 2 is their case, and 3rd is what case. So with that, I'm going to go in. The observations, and these have become 8 priority issues for you, Judge. And that means if they've lost on any one of these issues, they've lost the entire debate. Disregard the rest of your vote. They've lost on this, they've lost. You can no longer vote affirmation in today's debate. The first one was very standard, very what the motion says, and that is, should the United States federal government increase taxes? And the affirmation must uphold this to win this debate. But on top of that, they placed a burden on themselves by extending the parameters of the debate. And that is part 2, the second issue is, what do we do with said revenue? Do we put it into the deficit, which is what they're advocating, what they've specified since the very beginning of the debate, or do we put it into innovation? Do we spend it? Do we increase the economy other ways? And just at the right now, I want to say they dropped the second issue. What do we do with that revenue? Do we put it in the deficit? Do we spend it? And if they come up and specify in the next speech, this will be bringing up new information, new argumentation, which is not allowed. So that's my first observation, before I even get into my motives, they've lost in today's debate, because they've lost that 8 priority issue. But now I'm going to go into their plan text, the second place that they've lost. In this policy debate, they propose a policy, and in order for you to vote for it, there has to be a sound policy with details, with everything that needs to happen. And what they have not done this, and they've lost on their policy alone, because they said, we're going to implement the bucket rule, we're going to have a 30% minimum tax for all sources of revenue. Well, what does this mean? Does this mean we're going to have 30% on capital gains, salary, and dividend tax, in which case we add this up cumulatively to be 90% tax on all richest income? Well, this is astounding, this is detrimental, this is outrageous, but maybe it's not that, because they haven't said ambiguous. The whole thing is enigmatic. Is it an accumulative thing? In which case we're going to increase taxes on capital gains. This stifles investment. Or do we increase it on dividends, which hurts corporate stability? Or do we increase it in salary? In which case, in order to just compensate for the rest of the sources of revenue, we have to basically tax the entire salary in itself to get up to 30%. We don't know. They don't know. Politicians don't know. That's why it's not implemented in the status quo. We don't know. Thus, they've lost on their plan text as well, because they haven't presented a policy for you to vote on today. They've provided an idea, one that they haven't filled out with details or anything for you to vote on. So that's first voter. Second is their case. Let's look at the contentions they provided. And this is the very beginning has specified, we're going to put the revenue we get from these taxes into debt. Now I'm going to go over contention by contention because they're really quickly. Number 1, they pretty much completely dropped. We basically said, hey, number 1, the impact of the debt is credit rating dropped. They dropped the fact that the credit rating that we've seen drop in the past has not been because of size of debt, but been because of Congress squabbling. Thus, the impact has dropped. But on top of that, they completely dropped the fact that our counterplan, we can put the revenue and spend it into innovation, get jobs, increase revenue that way. They dropped this. Thus, they've lost the entire debate, because once again, that was that a priority issue. And so they dropped their first contention. That's the logistics. Those are the main countable, tangible impacts of their entire plan. Dropped that. But now let's go on to the second and third, which is, second was fairness. They also dropped this. They dropped the fact that I said in my speech, and my partner said in hers, that America is a meritocracy. It's not about disparity of wealth. It's the fact that, as we've seen, the standard of living in America is one of the best in the world. Our poorest of the poor still have flat screen TVs and fridges, because our society has been lifted by our 1%, by our top, because they've worked to get there. Doesn't matter whether the disparity of wealth is there. Our top 1% have worked to get there, and they're lifting all of us with them. And whether you agree with us or not, they've dropped this entire thing completely, silencing consent. Third was the public opinion. The impact of this was consumer spending. And I want to say, once again, this is negated by our case because it's outweighed by the harms. Now I'm going to get into the third because their contenders are dropped, which is off case. Why we should not increase taxes. We basically overall, they addressed our case with, hey, millionaires can afford it. It's not about whether they can afford it, it's whether they choose to afford it, and they do not. We brought up, and basically our entire case is, hey, it trickle-down effect, trickle-down detriments. We outsource, we have listed tens of companies, hundreds of companies have outsourced, moved their companies elsewhere because they can make more money elsewhere, which harms jobs, which harms investment because we no longer have that money in the United States going into green energy. It harms investment, and it cuts job growth. Unemployment is one of the A priority issues in the United States. Thus, our off-case shows that we should not increase taxes. So, on a net benefit standpoint, economically, we've shown you all the detriments that can come and all the better ways that they can do that they can run their case. But on top of that, the American dream shows that we should not, based on the American dream, we should not increase taxes. Thank you.
Is everyone ready? That's ready? Okay, good. I'd like to once again thank you all for being here today for today's round for the United States federal government to significantly increase taxes. And as a quick roadmap to today's debate, I'm going to quickly go over the ACT case, show why it still stands, go over the negation case briefly and show why it doesn't stand, then get into my 3 voting issues. As a quick disclaimer, I have a lot to get through, so I will not be accepting any POIs in this round. Now quickly jumping into the affirmation team's plan. Now first we're going to look at our plan text in general. Now one of the main complaints that the negation had about our plan is it's too vague. Now we mentioned that we're going to have a 30% tax on all sources of income for the wealthy. However, this basically was what our plan is. We're going to have it on all sources of income, whether it be capital gains, whether it be their salary. This is specifically what it is. Now, the negation tried to even make a smart comment about it, saying, well, if they had 3 sources of income, 30, 30, 30 is 90. Well, if you actually know math, that's not how it actually works. The 30, 30, 30 will all balance out to 30% of their income in the end. And if you want to even have more proof of this, 4 sources of income would be 120%. Now they're paying more taxes than they actually make. No, ignore this complete fallacy that the negation made, actually. The 30% is overall, it's going to be 30% of their income overall. It does not stand. So now moving on to the contentions of the affirmation team. And our first contention was about the $50 billion of revenue. And we gave one elaborate explanation of how this would help our debt and deficit. But the whole sole purpose of this contention was we're going to be making $50 billion in revenue. This wasn't a specific portion of our plan. This was a contention of an advantage our plan could bring about. However, nowhere in our argument did we ever say we are only going to put this money into the debt. Nowhere did I say these words. Nowhere did we put this burden on ourselves. Not this time. So you can see that this burden that the negation put on us doesn't even stand. And even when I first gave this contention, I said this might go towards countering the debt or deficit or smart spending. And though I did not elaborate on smart spending, my opponents did for me, and I'd like to thank them. So all the benefits they said about smart spending, please look at this on our first contention. Our contention was solely about $50 billion more in revenue, which would help the United States in various ways. We nowhere in our plan text said this is only going to go towards the debt. But now moving on to the second contention of the affirmation, and the third, they basically reviewed these two as the same. They kept talking about, the negation kept speaking of the meritocracy and American values, how the wealthy basically get there through their hard work and bring up the rest of the people. However, as we have shown from statistics and the disparities of wealth, the wealthy are climbing much higher than the rest of the American people, with their 281% income increase versus the 15% of the bottom 1/5. You can see that they are not bringing up the bottom people of American society with them, and actually they are hurting other ideals of the American dream, that anybody can stand up and get wealthy, because their accumulation of wealth is basically hurting others, not this time, and it's basically keeping others in poverty, whereas they're making much money, they're not contributing their fair share to the American government, they're preventing our government from helping others, and you can see that it's only hurting American ideals. And as my partner mentioned, we have the American ideal of democracy on our side. This is what the people want. The negation team never refuted the ideal of democracy, which I believe is a much more important value in the United States than the fact that the rich could make money than our system of meritocracy, which the negation team doesn't even uphold in today's round. And the American democracy, our ideals, one of the main reasons we went through the American Revolution is a strong American value, which is met by listening to what the people want. These contentions stand. And now, quickly, a brief refutation of the negation case is they mentioned the trickle-down effect and hurts job growth in their two contentions, basically. And they mentioned outsourcing corporations. Well, one in our plan text, we're talking about taxing individual people. If an individual has a higher income tax, are they suddenly going to move to a different country? No, they've outsourced corporations. We're not not increasing we're not increasing the corporate tax. We said individual income. We said the taxes on individual incomes in today's round. And I mentioned, for example, companies that already have outsourced. Well, there are many companies who already have outsourced in today's day. They never said how many more companies would outsource as a result of this. As I've shown you, because we're only dealing with individuals, this doesn't really stand. Now moving on to my voting issues in today's round. My first is the negation case. Now, the case was given really quickly. It didn't have much statistics. And as I've shown you, it isn't even relevant in today's round, as this tax is only on individual people. And they haven't shown any circumstances of wealthy people in the United States completely moving to a different country due to taxes. They've only moved their own corporations while living in the United States. Not this time, please. I'm going to protect time. So you can see that their case doesn't stand as a whole and is faulty. Now the second voting issue of today's round is the affirmation case. I've shown you how the negation's vagueness argument does not stand. It was actually faulty in the mathematics behind it. I've shown you how our contentions don't stand, and we do not, how our contentions do stand, and how basically the burden that the negation tried to put on us was never there from the beginning. They were just putting words into our mouth, which I never said. So you can see that the affirmation case as a whole stands. We value strengthening our economy, we value democracy, and we value bringing the most benefits to the United States, which is my third voting issue of net benefits. The negation never even showed benefits of keeping the current status quo, only potential harms, which I showed don't stand, versus the benefits of democracy and improving the United States economy. On the affirmation team, I ask for a strong vote in favor of the yes.
Well done, Chuck. That was a great